tres, cuatro, cinco, and seis.
Whatever you say.
All right, so everybody's been hearing about Russia invading Ukraine over the past month, but what if I could tell you that it could have been prevented over 75 years ago? Back at the end of World War II, General Patton tried to convince General Eisenhower and President Truman that Russia was becoming a greater threat and that he should either wage war and take them on while they had the resources, or, well, that's basically what he tried to do, but Truman and Eisenhower couldn't get on the bandwagon because they'd already lost so many lives with World War II and they didn't want to continue that conflict. One of the also major things that came from the Russians was the Cold War, and that also happened after World War II, and it started when the Allies were trying to divide up Germany into different governing sectors, from like Britain was one, US was one, and Russia was also another one. And after that, Russia and the US were also made as the two world powers, and they were put into like a non-confrontal race between each other. And one of those main races was, of course, the arms race, which was one of the greatest threats between the two countries because they were all trying to build their nuclear warheads, and it was all threats. You'd have like bomb drills in schools and all that. And that could also have been prevented before the end of World War II because the U.S. was the only one that had nuclear weapons, bless you. And Russia didn't have access to nuclear weapons, so they would have had that advantage if they ever went to war. And along with the arms race, there was also the spread of communism, which leads us to our other conflict, non-confrontal conflict really, was the war on communism. And that could have been prevented, and all the deaths along with that could have been prevented if they went ahead and fought the Russians after World War II. And it started, the war on communism really started when China became communist in 1949, and it was starting to grow in power. And after that, about a year afterwards, the Korean War started, and it divided Korea into two different countries, which is still divided today between North and South Korea, North being communist and South being a republic. And later on in the 60s, the Vietnam War started, and it was just like Korea. It was also split half, and except for they actually got back together. And well, the US didn't fight Russia, like the two didn't really fight each other. They provided the resources for the other two to fight each other, and they basically stood back and let it happen. For the most part, US actually got more involved in it. And after that, well, actually during the same time in the late 50s, they also started the space race, which was the race to the moon, of course. And it started with the Gemini project, trying to get up into orbit and all that, and later ended with Apollo missions landing on the moon. And according to the Planetary Society, the US spent about $49.4 billion on the race to the moon, which is equal to about $482 billion in present time money. And it's a great, like, it was a great thing for science and everything, but it wasn't accepted by a lot of people, mainly poor people, African Americans, like in Harlem and places like that. They were more focused on the fight for economic justice, so the better jobs, more thriving. And if these funds that were used for the space race were used to feed the poor, it would have gave a lot more support and faith in the country. And which leads me to my third or final reason why we should have went to war with Russia back then, was that over the past 50 years we had all those conflicts. Now we have a rising conflict between Russia invading Ukraine, and it would have likely never seen the light of day if Patton had been listened to back then. Russia wouldn't have been a great world power like it is today. Other countries wouldn't be intimidated by it. You wouldn't have NATO and all this other stuff. And my main point on why patents should have been listened to, and we should have kicked the problem in the bud right then, is because all the lives lost between the war in Korea, you got the war in Vietnam, now the Ukraine invasion, and we also have the Cuban Missile Crisis, which didn't really see that many casualties. But General Patton said once, if it should be necessary to fight the Russians, we should do it sooner than later, and it would be better. And now with everything going on nowadays, I can almost see where his suspicions were correct and should have been listened to, and I hope you guys can too.
Make sure. 2